So, what exactly was going on in America while various and sundry European countries, were killing each other for the better part of a year? That's what we're going to talk about right now. So, in order to understand, by the way, I'm sorry, I'm having some almonds. In order to understand America's position in all this, let's take a look at Woodrow Wilson first. Now, again, let's just keep in mind Wilson had really no experience in dealing with foreign countries. And ideally, realistically, what he wanted was to avoid conflict. He didn't want to be involved in other countries' business as far as like imperialism or fighting or anything like that. But he did want to spread his ideas and his philosophy to other countries. And it was his goal for foreign policy get other nations to cooperate with him, make his ideals a reality. His Secretary of State was William Jennings Bryan, who, by this point in time, had been to Europe on several occasions and gave speeches, talked about his cross of gold idea to anybody who would listen, as well as basically sold his vision of what progressivism and populism was. And in that respect, Bryan had a lot of experience. And remember, Bryan had basically gotten Woodrow Wilson the nomination, so it worked out well. There is probably no better example of the absolute train wreck of Woodrow Wilson's ideas than in Mexico and the U.S.'s relationship with Mexico. So, to begin with, during the Taft administration, there had been a military uprising in Mexico, and the government was overthrown and replaced by a military government. A military government that was supported and backed up by the United States. The military government agrees to hold elections, which, depending on how your view of things is, may or may not have been completely above board and honest. But the outcome of the election is that the military government wins office legitimately. They're elected. What follows is lots of assassinations and murder, and some areas of open war in Mexico between the democratically elected military government and those people who opposed it. Woodrow Wilson did not want the fighting, nor did he really want the military government. Basically demanded that Mexico hold new elections. And the Mexicans did. And again, I'm not questioning the legitimacy of the election because it's really not the purpose of this course. This time, Woodrow Wilson's choice, the Mexican socialists, win the election. And after the victory of the socialists, things get worse. What a surprise. Socialists becoming in power and things getting worse. Tens of thousands of Mexican citizens are arrested, imprisoned, murdered, all because they are either wealthy or they're devoted Roman Catholics, which, by the way, is not hard to do in Mexico because, like, literally 99% of Mexico was Catholic. Wilson was absolutely fine with this. It promoted stability in our southern neighbor, and it also undermined the Catholic Church in Mexico, which Wilson was not a big fan of. Now, the problem with all this is that the former Army officers who had been in charge until the second round of elections are not happy about this. And one of them is this fellow here. This is General Francisco Villa, aka Pancho Villa. Pancho Villa assembles a group of banditos, begin raiding across the U.S. border into Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. This is the town of Columbus, I think, New Mexico. Uh, this is the remains of Columbus after one of Pancho Villa's raids. Pancho Villa is stealing stuff. He's burning things down. He's killing people. Random soldier guarding a smoking ruin. Not quite sure what that's up, but hey, good job. Um, and generally, Pancho Villa is wreaking havoc. Wilson demands that the Mexican government make it stop. And the Mexican government's like, what do you want us to do? So it's like, I want you to make it stop. And they're like, well, we can't make it stop. So Wilson does probably the logical thing. He invades Mexico. The United States Army invades Mexico in 1915. And what follows is over a year of the worst game of Where's Waldo ever. They can't catch Pancho Villa. They chase him everywhere. He's never quite there. The man who leads the United States Army into Mexico is this man right here, General John Pershing, like the donut. And we'll talk a bit more about him a little bit later. But here, notice something unusual right here. In this picture, who's he standing next to? General Pershing is standing next to Pancho Villa. Why? Because Pershing and his men had trained Pancho Villa because the U.S. Army had gone down and had done training with the Mexicans when the Army was in charge. So Americans were chasing a guy who was raiding America that we had trained. And it's kind of weird. Not only do we invade Mexico to chase him, the U.S. Navy actually occupies the entire city of Veracruz in an effort to show how unhappy America is, to which the Mexican government probably rightfully threatened to go to war with the U.S. if we didn't leave, which we thankfully did. Now, um, interestingly enough, Wilson changes his support for the socialist government not long after this when all of a sudden the socialists begin confiscating American property and businesses down there because they're socialists and that's what they do. I don't know why Wilson was surprised by this, but he was. Okay, next lesson, we're going to look at like how this feeds into America's position with World War One. Peace and love.